Well, hi guys, Luetin here. Today I'm joined by Jackfrags.
Hey.
Hey Jack. We're going to be talking about community, not necessarily specifically to Battlefield, but probably we will talk about Battlefield. But this goes sort of in line with my topics that I've been talking about recently, where I'm discussing the issues around like having a very, very large community player base for a game and how that can influence it. So Jack, let me just ask you, do you feel like the issue of having a massive community can negatively impact a player's experience? And I guess I ask that in a kind of, not just to, do we see less people having enough focus in a game, enough people playing the objective or playing the team in the game or whatever, but just do you think like having such a large community can have a bad impact on however you choose to play that game?
Are you talking specifically like the number of players or the number of new players in the game, and that has a negative impact on like team play?
Yeah, because it kind of, if you think about it, if you have a very, very large player base, and this is where I've been coming from recently, you know, you're only going to have a certain percentage of those players who want to play a certain way. So in the past, where you may have seen like, you know, a third of players focusing on a certain thing, now what I find is you get into games and you find, well, that's a lot less. So you only find like 3 or 4 players who are sort of playing similarly to you. And then that goes, but that also goes the other way as well. You know, it's like you might have players who are trying to do achievements or whatever. You know, there's been a lot of talk about diluting the game to make it more appealing to a mass audience as well.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel like they've diluted BF1?
A lot of people say that. But I actually think if you actually look at the game, I actually don't think it is as diluted as people say. I think there's this talk about kind of making it simpler, etc., etc. But if you actually really get into the nitty-gritty and the details of it, I don't think it is. The reason I said that before is because, like I say, I hear this a lot. I hear people saying, "Oh, they've diluted it down to make it." Usually, people
more
say
accessible.
like, "Yeah, accessible is the word that gets used a lot."
Yeah.
And it's like, to be honest, I mean, you can argue that almost both ways. You can argue like, "Oh, okay, if something gets made more accessible, then the word usually is like they're making it better for casuals. People can just jump in and play or whatever." But I think it goes the other way as well. I've been talking about for a long time that if you want to improve team play and objective play, you need to help people understand what they're supposed to be doing in the game. And the only way you do that is kind of by leading people in and showing them what they're supposed to do.
That's a big problem that I think the Battlefield franchise has always had, though. Because I think you're right, like Battlefield 1 is a very complex game. If you compare it to its competition, right? So, you know, like Call of Duty, COD, Halo, Battlefield games have always had so many more elements to them. You know, gadgets you can use, ways that you can score points, teamwork, ways that you can help out squad members, right? And with BF1, and this goes back to what you were saying, I think, about having a larger community, perhaps it has a negative impact on the players that want to be, you know, always playing the objective and focusing on team play. You're going to get a lot of new players, and BF1, I think, out of all of the recent Battlefield games, I think it sold the most as far as I'm aware, and it also had the most new players because it was something new, because it was like, hey, this is World War One. And I mean, the trailers that they brought out, no doubt they were fantastic, and they probably incentivized a load of new people who hadn't played a BF game before to try the franchise out, right? So you've got all these new players coming into the franchise, and they don't have the experience that we have with, you know, going all the way back to the Battlefield 1942.
Yeah.
Battlefield was established then as a team game with multiple objectives and multiple classes, and it was always very complicated. And I think BF1 still has a large element of that, but what BF1 doesn't have, and what most of the Battlefield games don't have, is some form of tutorial system. They've got the pop-ups that happen in the game whilst you're playing, but if you're new to the franchise, number one, you're probably not paying attention to them, and it's a lot more detailed and intricate than just something that comes on the screen and says, hey, you can heal this guy by pressing Q and throwing a med pack at him, you know? There's never been a good tutorial system in the game, like within the games, because not everyone watches YouTube videos. You know, not everyone plays a single player. Right?
Do you know something that was interesting though? There was one Battlefield which did have a tutorial system. That was Battlefield 1943, which was just on console. Yeah, the DLC. Which, by the way,
what was that like? I don't remember that.
It was extremely good. I am actually going to talk about this soon as well, because I would really like to see them do like a kind of like a bare bones sort of Battlefield, if you will, because Battlefield 1943, it basically had like hold on one sec, I'm gonna have to look it up. Okay, so listen, Battlefield 1943, the only mode that was in there was Conquest and Air Superiority. That was it. It only had 3 classes: infantry, and you're armed with an SMG and an anti-tank rocket, and that's it. That's all you get. Rifleman, armed with semi-automatic rifle, which is just a Garand, and then a rifle grenade, and that's it. Scout, armed with a scoped rifle, a pistol, and dynamite. And that is literally all you had. Each class had unlimited supply of ammunition. Explosives and ordnance takes time to replenish. And then you had like tanks, a landing craft, aircraft, and some jeeps and stuff like that. And you could also call in bombers over the airfields. And it was stuff like, it focused on like the maps of like Wake Island, Guadalcanal, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at it, it's clearly using like the Bad Company engine. It's got that sort of style to it. But it played extremely good. And I've always put it down to the fact that, bear in mind it's on console as well, so arguably not the most hardcore player base, so that's a questionable one. But I mean, you know, I found it interesting that my experiences in sort of Bad Company 2, and even when Battlefield 3 was coming out, and I go back and play Battlefield 1943, and somehow the players just seemed way more focused. Now, again, I think there might be a couple of reasons in on that. One was that the maps were pretty small, because it's like Wake Island, there's not many places you can go, so it kind of naturally, you know, focuses people in on certain points. People love all the customization and the details of all the characters and all the units and stuff that we have now, but that literal bare bones of like, hey, I'm a rifleman, bang, off you go. Like, there's no confusion or interpretation to that class. It's like, you got your rifle.
It's very clear what you've got to do.
Yeah, and also to a degree, you've got a Garand rifle, semi-automatic. There's not many different ways you can kind of like embellish that class. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're better at certain distances for engagement. At shorter range, the SMG is probably going to beat you, etc. So it balanced out everything very quickly. And again, that's a good thing to bring in there about is a balance. You know, because by just having those 3 classes. So the tutorial was really good. It was literally like, you know, you started off, as I remember, you started off and it was like the classic, like you crouch, you crawl, whatever, you know, you shoot, that's how it goes. And then it was like, here's your bases, here's what you got to capture. And then it sort of did like an overview. It also had like a flight tutorial, like showing you had to go through like little circle checkpoints and stuff. It was really basic, but then the game was really basic. But I just liked at the time the fact that they even bothered to put it in at all. You know, nobody wants to have to be forced to do these things. But I think it'd be super helpful where, you know, before you started to actually play the game, it was like, hey, almost like, you know, with like Gran Turismo and licenses, you know, you've got to like go through and it's like, hey, before you move into this bit, you just got to do this. And it would just be a way of kind of, you know, making sure people have at least seen it. Then at least you've given some token gesture to hoping people can actually, you know, engage with that. And then if they don't beyond that, well, then I guess that's just where we are, you know?
Well, I mean, what would be really cool is a system in, say, BF1, for example, where they had single-player, multiplayer scenarios where it's, you know, it's just you and the rest is AI, but it's all kind of done in stages and you can't fail at it. So, say, for example, you want to do the assault class tutorial and you spawn in on San Quentin Scar and you've got an AT grenade and a rocket gun, and all of a sudden a tank rolls up and the game pauses, and then, you know, maybe it's a voiceover or a prompt on screen that says, hey, press 3 to select your anti-tank grenade and throw it at that tank. You know, that gadget is specifically designed to damage tanks. And you do that and you kind of go through the steps, and it's a very simple optional tutorial, because obviously, you know, most people don't want to sit there through kind of forced tutorials, do they? But for the new players, I think something like that should be an option, because if they want to learn how, you know, how to, let's say, most effectively play the game and score the most points, because a lot of people like to do that, right? Rank up quickly. Then they're going to have to know all of these things about team play and gadgets and specializations and everything like that. And I think having some kind of scenario which was single player, but in a multiplayer environment, it could switch to a plane, it could switch to a recon, you know, with a spotting flare or anything really. That's a very simple scripted scenario which can't which can't, well, you know, I'm not saying this is a challenge. It's just like, this is how this works. Because if they're just jumping into a multiplayer game as a new player, they're not going to know, really, that an anti-tank grenade is available for the assault class, and they should be throwing it at a tank if it's nearby to them. You know, and that's something that they'll learn naturally, yes, but the time it takes is going to be so much longer, isn't it, if they're not taught it?
Maybe, I mean, maybe you could give like an unlock for it as well. You know, that would be fair. I mean, we have all these bloody achievements in the game already, which I'm not a massive fan about. But I mean, you know, if you're going to achieve anything, maybe make it constructive, where you know you're actually showing this. I think that's the only thing I do like with the achievements. Sometimes is they are kind of like, you know, drop med packs for your teammates, give ammo to your teammates. It is kind of pushing people towards like, hey, help out others and don't just focus on yourself all the time. One thing I did like in Battlefield 1 a lot, actually, and this is, you know, there's not a great deal that I kind of super liked about Battlefield 1, but one thing I really did like was I liked the fact that they implemented like those YouTubers videos on the sort of homepage, and you had guys like Stone Mountain or whatever were doing like tutorials and things. Again, I don't know what the engagement is with that though. You know, I don't know what the engagement is.
People actually watch them.
You know, do they sort of look at it and go kind of, oh, that's interesting, like, and then not only that, but are you hitting the people that it's valid and worthwhile to see? You know, are the people that are engaging the people that actually would take something away from that or whatever?
Yeah. Well, I was told that those videos are tailored to your stats.
Oh, that's interesting. I
don't know the truth to that, but I was told that. Like, if I load the game up, my videos will be different to yours, you know? And it's picking from a massive pool of videos based on your KD, your score per minute, how many games you've won. You know, maybe it picks up that you never use vehicles. It might put up a tank tutorial there. You know, I think that's kind of the thinking behind it.
But look, see, now getting back to the wider issue of kind of just the way people are playing the games, do you think you've seen like a deterioration in the general quality of the player base? Do you think that's fair to say, or do you think it's kind of just like a natural change which has happened over time, just because, again, like expansion of the player base, new people coming into the game and they're just sort of bringing the way they want to play the game into it?
It's a really tough one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really difficult. And this is what I've been struggling with recently. This is why I keep asking a lot of people at the moment. I'm asking a load of different people, producers and friends and even developers that I know, sort of asking them, like, what do you think about this? Because
yeah, I mean, for me, like, if I play by myself, for example, like, I play a lot of Battlefield by myself because a lot of my friends don't play it anymore.
And I see that. Fair play to you. For
yeah, no, and I mean, for the most part, I really enjoy the game. There's a few things that I'm vehemently against in BF1, yeah, but for the most part, I have fun with it. You know, I've got like 500 hours or something. I still enjoy playing the game, I mean, it might be different for me though, because, you know, because of my status as a well-known YouTuber, if I join a game, generally speaking, people will join a squad with me, and they'll come in as medic and support, and they will revive me, they'll drop me ammo, you know? So maybe I'm not getting a fair representation of what the game is actually like. Yeah, it's a good point. So I don't know, like, I've definitely seen with BF1 in particular, like, because sniping is so easy and the bullet velocity is so fast. Yeah. I'd say most of the time, especially in operations, the majority of players, it would seem to me, are, you know, playing as scouts. Now, I can't back that up with any stats because I don't have access to that kind of data, but it definitely feels like in BF1 there are more scouts on the battlefield kind of hanging back. Yeah. Maybe that's their role, though. You know, maybe they're supposed to be hanging back and picking people off. But it feels like in operations, you definitely see more snipers, and I do think that's because it's so satisfying and easy to do now.
Snipers used to always be. I remember, like in Bad Company 2. I can't remember the name of the bloody map because it's been so long ago. Do you remember the map where you start? It was like an autumnal map, and it was like a kind of a bay. It was like a rush map, and you started off with some Black Hawks. You had to capture an island, and then you sort of pushed into a base further down the line. Do you remember that one?
I know the one you mean, but I don't remember the name.
But do you remember on that hill at the very first base, you had to, like, there was always snipers on that hill, always, like, shooting down onto the island. And it was like, those snipers were never very effective. But what I would often find is that just having them there and shooting at the island would often distract the players on the island, because they'd feel the rounds hitting around them and they'd get freaked out, or they'd try and counter snipe or whatever. Just the effect of having those snipers would distract the guys enough that you could then just hop in and capture or blow it up or whatever, you know. So it was almost like a suppression mechanic. And I often think that's often, so snipers don't even necessarily need to be getting the kills, just if you feel like you're under pressure from them. But you know, on the other hand, I was playing some BF this week, and it was that again, I'm terrible with names of maps, I always forget, but it was like that, it was a very, it's the big one with the castle and all the rest of it, the big open bay, you know, and just literally half the team on both sides snipers. it's like, for God's sake. Have you ever felt like Battlefield would benefit from something like class restrictions? Have you ever thought about that? Do you think it would be a good or a bad thing?
I think, I mean, it would definitely, I think it would improve the quality of you know, team play, because scouts, apart from really having the spotting flair, not much team play there really is there in that class. No.
Like I say, you can suppress and you can maybe pick off problem players here and there if you're good, but beyond that,
yeah. The thing is, like, class restrictions I think is really dangerous, especially for a game like Battlefield, because it's never, like, I don't think Battlefield has ever been like a super serious hardcore tactical game. Like, even going back to, you know, BF2, I think BF2 was probably the best Battlefield game for team play. It felt like that for me. But
you see, again, I was actually talking about this with Drewski the other evening, and again, you go back to Battlefield 2, totally different audience and totally different quantity of people playing online at that time. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you didn't have like people having, basically, you didn't really have mainstream PC gaming at that time. You know, if you were a PC gamer at that time, you were probably just a pretty hardcore gamer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, so it's complete, and that's why I say, you know, things have changed really greatly.
Yeah, and also back then, if you were playing BF2, for example, that's probably one of the only games that you were playing. Like, whereas now people will dip in and out, right? Because there's so much choice and not as much time.
Yeah.
People will play BF1, then they'll go and play COD World War 2, you know, then they'll go and play some Evil Within 2 or Shadow of War. You know, there's so much more choice now for gamers that maybe they don't have time to dedicate as much to one specific game or franchise.
Something Drew said to me as well, and I said I'm stealing that because it's a really good quote. He said, everybody has Battlefield now. And, you know, so you think a few years ago, and like maybe you were like, oh yeah, I play Battlefield. No, if you ask someone that you know who is a gamer, yeah, I got Battlefield. Everybody has it. Everybody has it. It's just a thing. And it's like, that just shows the giant difference in how things have changed. And that kind of leads toward where I'm coming from, where it's like, I think something has changed here. Like, it's gone way beyond like what it used to be. And again, look, to come back to what I was saying about class restrictions, again, people are always like, LT, you can't tell people how to play if they want to play their own way, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, look, I get it. I'm just trying to have a discussion around this. I'm just curious about this. I'm not saying like it has to be this hard. It doesn't have to be Siege. You know, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is just, I'm just interested in thinking around the idea of like, okay, what can we do here? And it's like, yeah, if this is where we are and it's just how it is now, then fine. You know, if you want to, you can make team play and objective play happen, right? And I've been thinking about this week myself. You know, back in BF3 and BF4, I used to host a server, and we used to get people on, and we used to have like blazing team play games that would just, you know, almost every game would come down to 10 tickets. You know, it was people were that aggressive and that sort of focused on what they were doing, and it was amazing. Now, every time I bring that up, everybody's like, yes, do it. So I'm probably going to do that soon, but I'm trying to actually think, can I do it a bit bigger than that? You know, I'm actually trying to think like, can I set up a Discord which is kind of open, and it's literally just like, hey, do you like playing really objectively in team play? You know, for Battlefield? Well, just come join this Discord, and then you can meet other people that are also like that, and then maybe you can. So this is where I'm kind of coming from. It's like, look, you know, if we can't change the community to sort of lean towards that kind of thing, well, fine, you know, they can do their thing, and maybe we need to sort of focus on setting up more internal communities which are like, hey, do you like that kind of style player? Come and join in, get involved. But I would personally, because I actually think it's a much more exciting, driven way to play. Like, I think it feels more, you know, you get more sort of, you know, excitement out of the game. And this is another thing I ask you, Jack. Like, do you feel do you feel like excited? Do you feel like clutch? Do you feel like on the edge of your seat when you're playing the game? Or do you feel like it's like, and be honest, or do you feel like you're kind of just going through the motions? But I have often said, like, there's a funny thing with Battlefield where even though you can be just kind of going along doing, you know, yeah, got that guy, okay, now I'm going to go over here, I got that guy. You know, it's still very appealing. You know, there's something in it that makes you want to keep going. But for me, it's felt very matter of fact. I don't know. How do you feel? Do you feel still the passion in there for like the actual gameplay?
What do you mean by matter of fact? Sorry, can you be?
Yeah, just like a lot of what I've seen a lot of people that I know as well, like and sort of my viewers as well, is talking about like a malaise almost with Battlefield, where it's kind of like you just feel like you don't really care about what you're doing, but somehow it still feels really good. You know, it's sort of like you, and it's almost like there's something in the mechanics of engaging and shooting those other players, and sort of there's something in the actual physicality of the way the gunplay is. That's the really appealing thing. But beyond that, you don't particularly care about what you're doing. Whereas my point is, when I was doing these kind of really full-on team play games, you really cared about like grabbing that flag and clearing it and getting those guys down. Whereas now I kind of am like very whatever, but it's more the mechanics that I kind of find enjoyable. You think that would be fair to say? And feel free to disagree completely.
I've never really thought about it, to be honest. I mean, I like, generally speaking, like I said, I enjoy BF1. I like playing it even by myself, but I mean, it's weird because I think when you've played so many Battlefield games, like the kind of experience of, let's say you're playing Conquest in a squad with your friends, you're all on Discord speaking to each other. The experience of, you know, overwhelming a flag from the enemy and capturing it for your team, I think it gets watered down because we've done it so many times, you know.
Yeah.
And the only really new thing that they brought to BF1 was operations, and like operations, like in 64 players, I think it can be an absolute nightmare, and I think it's way too many players. Like 48 would be the sweet spot for operations, but at least what operations does well is it focuses everyone in the server on a very simple, on two, or you know, or even sometimes three simple objectives, right?
Yeah.
So operations is actually where I find the most kind of team play and enjoyment from a personal perspective. Like when I'm playing operations, people do tend to play the objective more, from my experience. But yeah, I think for us, perhaps it just has been watered down because we've done it so much, you know. But I agree with you. I agree with you in that respect. But yeah, the physicality of Battlefield games, it's something that no other games really have, and the randomness and variety. Yeah. You know, there's no other game out there like BF1, is there really? Like, what other game is doing 64 players with destructions, with loads of vehicles, all this stuff going on at the same time? You can't get that experience in any other game, and I think people forget that.
I feel like things could be, like you say, greatly improved if they just took off that focus on the 64, because 64 used to work. Like, I don't know, it's become this, I know people, again, I almost feel like it's a bit of a kind of, it's a Battlefield thing where they're kind of like, we've got 64 player, you know, and it's kind of, it's like a selling point, and that's why they don't want to let it go. But I do feel like it kind of harms the game sometimes, you know, because of, like you say, it just can be a bit over. And we've talked about this, actually, I think you would agree, like, you've talked about this, and I know other guys that we know have talked about this as well, that I think most sort of producers maybe that are in Battlefield would probably agree that I think 64 doesn't often help the game or the gameplay, because it can just be too much. And I often wonder whether having that amount of 64 players kind of has almost become the norm. And maybe that's why, like I say, when you look at how people are playing, because it's so chaotic, people focus only on what they're doing, because they you know, they almost can't think outside that space.
Yeah, they can't process everything else.
Yeah.
But then again, I think a lot of it comes down to map design, because in BF1, for example, a map like Quentin Scar, I think, is perfect for 64 players because of how kind of spread out the flags are, right? And you've got all these different pockets, and there's never a moment where you're like, there's just too many people there. Like, I can't process that. I can't, in my mind, I'm like, I can't do anything tactical in this situation that would give me an advantage. It's just a meat grinder. You know, some maps are like that, right? Whereas other maps like Quentin Scar, where you've got this nice balance between air, vehicle and infantry, it works out really well. But then you've got other maps you know, where it just doesn't. And in a game mode like Operations, where there's only a couple of objectives, like, I don't know if you've played much of the In the Name of the Czar maps on Operations, but they're really not very good, because the map design just lends to this. Either there's no cover on a map like Galicia, and it's too flat, and it's just sniper heaven, or you get a map like Tsaritsyn, where there's two objectives in a very small, chaotic urban environment, and it just feels like you can't do anything. It's just going through the tickets, you know, until one team wins or loses.
Exactly, and that's why I say, you see, often my experience feels like you're kind of just going through the motions. You know, it's like, because like you say, I don't mean that to sound too like deprecating, but it's more kind of like there is no other way to sort of say it, because that's literally what you're doing. You know, it's like you're just literally trying to survive and kill the other guys, and that's about all there is to it. And you know, you may want to sort of have more of an impact, but like you say, you can't really have that, and it's kind of pointless. You just all you can do is kind of lock down into what you're doing. But you know, you're right, and it's like when you do think about other maps, like if you go back to you know, like let's say Gulf of Oman or something, you know, that's a good example of a map where you have like these compartmentalized areas of the map, and it's sort of, you know, you get battles focus in and around certain sites. But then in between, you're almost just transporting between, so you don't get into those situations where you're overwhelmed in one area, as opposed to something classic like Metro, where of course it literally is just bottlenecking everybody together to a point, and it just becomes an absolute slaughter fest, you know.
But then again, I've heard, I don't want to, you know, throw names out there, but I've heard some DICE devs say, you know, like Metro was the most popular map in BF4.
Yeah.
BF3,
and on 64.
Yeah,
which is mental.
And I don't know whether that's because more people just enjoy the chaos, or is it because they're using those maps to farm points to rank up faster?
That's
like, you know, is that it?
That's it. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's definitely it. But the thing was that, you see, again, this is where I do feel in the minority, because it's like, I am the kind of player who, if you're in a Metro situation like that and you're just trapped on those staircases, I will throw a couple of grenades up and then a smoke, and then I'll just be like, fuck it, let's go, and I'll just run up the stairs. And you would actually be astonished how many times I made it through alive, mainly because they just didn't expect it. And I would get through alive, you could literally, it was almost like hiding in plain sight. You know, they're so focused on just that shooting gallery there. They don't see you, because it's so chaotic. And I would often get past, I'd literally run past people in the open, and they wouldn't sort of see you because they're not expecting it. They don't expect anybody to be stupid enough to try and run through it. And then I'd get into one of those buildings up the back, spawn my whole squad, back cap them, and then you see, this is what I find exciting, is making things like that happen, you know. So again, it's not about being like, haha, look how good I am. That's not what it's about. It's about just the interestingness of how you can change stuff. So it's like you back cap them, and then the guys on the stairs are like, oh shit, they've capped us, for, you know. So some of those guys pull off, and then suddenly your team have an ability to actually push and break the line, because they've had to pull guys off of that point to come back and try and control that flag. Although, like 8 times out of 10, the team would just do nothing, and then you'd be like, well, that was a whole waste of time, you know. But,
yeah. Well, that whole thing, I think, especially in Conquest, is lost in BF1 though, because of the point system.
Yes.
And I know that they're looking at changing it on the CT at the moment, and perhaps bringing it to the base game, because in BF1 on Conquest, you just get this ring around the rosy thing, where there's like on a map like what's it called, Novell Nights, right? That one, that's the night map they did. That one in particular is very ring around the rosy, where unless you force your, you know, a large portion of your team, instead of just capping the outside flags, to actually move inwards towards the center, you often don't get that many, you know, firefights unless you're forcing them, because you're just running around in circles capping flags, and a lot of the BF1 maps are like that. Yeah. Whereas in BF3 and BF4, the map design was a bit different, and because of the old Conquest rules, you could do stuff like that, where you would back cap and kind of pull the enemy team apart a bit, right?
Yes, exactly.
Rather than just clumping around in a big group, which seems to happen a bit more in BF1.
This is, you know, again, this kind of leans towards what I'm saying, that, you know, I mean, the night where I had a gigantic rant on Twitter, because I was like, fuck this game. Like I've got some great shots that I just took off my phone, like on the screen, where it's 100%. It was like, this is Battlefield now, and it's like one of those. It's the giant, one of the new maps from the Tsar stuff, and it's like, it's this giant map, which in any other world would be a perfect Battlefield Conquest map. It's huge. It's got giant spaces between, and where are they? They're all on C. It was like a 64-player game, and I was just like, for Christ's sake. But it's just like, you know, an interesting thing is, how do you sort of try to assist people to kind of think outside that space, you know? And it's like, so here's the thing that I was discussing with someone the other day. Do we add more UI? So it's like, hey, go here. Or do you experiment and go the other way? Do you experiment and go more towards like something kind of not like Squad, obviously, but what I'm saying is like more minimal UI, so that the people have less information, and then you're actually more reliant on you know, being aware. You know, it's like if you're not so aware, then you get punished for it. But again, the more I think about that, the more I think, damn, these guys currently get punished enough. So it's like,
I don't think that would, you know, going more minimal would work in a Battlefield game, because I don't think it's the audience. You know, the audience is different, completely different. And
again, that's kind of my point, you know.
Yeah.
But then, but I also think, I actually don't think adding any extra UI would make any difference either, because I think often these kind of, I think people that are playing, they just don't care. I think they're just doing their thing, and they're just not interested, you know.
Yeah. Well, you don't. I think the devs don't want to kind of force you to play in a certain way as well, right?
No. Yeah.
Because that's the appeal of Battlefield games as well, that you can play it in a multitude of different ways that you can't do in other games. But perhaps a bit more direction wouldn't go amiss.
I think you've got to reward people. I for the longest time, I think, you know, and again, like I always hold my hands up if I change my opinion about stuff, and it's kind of like, you know, I think for the longest time I was coming at this from the wrong angle. I think I was being way too, like, you know, we should make the game so that this is how it kind of focuses towards. And you're right, I just don't think it is that kind of game. And maybe I don't think it ever was, you know. And it's, I think if you are going to try and lead people towards doing a certain thing, then it's got to be like the carrot rather than the stick. I think, you know, you've got to try and allow people to be like, either benefit them somehow, or say like, you know, like you'll get X thing for doing this or whatever, you know. It's like, it has to sort of lead you in that direction, I think.
But is there something that could be done for, you know, in-game audio and visual cues as well? Like, something that DICE do so well is that, you know, when you watch their gameplay trailers, they add all of this like audio, right? All this VO, and it makes it seem like such a cool battle, battle moment. Like, we've got to get that objective, you know. But that's in the game, but it's so quiet. And
I said this at the release. It was like, this was one of my main talking points at the release, was like, I think it was in the beta, wasn't it, where they had the woman and she was like, they're capping Bravo, and it was like, they were like, oh, it's just a placeholder, and then it was like, haha, only kidding, it's in the game for real. And you're like, what?
The announcer.
And I was just like, it needs to be like some British guy going, you know, they're taking Alpha, move it, get over there, you know. It needs to be something like that. You know,
and more contextual audio with
contextual
squad
motivating
members and teammates that are next to you whilst you're moving towards a flag, let's say.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily thinking about capturing that flag, but if there's a squad mate in the vicinity, it could trigger a cool audio cue, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of visuals as well, I saw a great suggestion, you know. And is this something they can do? I don't know, because it has an effect on frame rate and optimization, server performance, but say, for example, you die, but you're in a revivable state. In the game at the moment, you're literally a lifeless ragdoll on the floor. You know, and then you think for a second, what if that body on the floor was kind of like, you know, writhing about in pain a bit and like moving his arms up and down and screaming, you know, medic, you know, revive me or something. Would that incentivize more medics to then go, damn, I need to help that guy. He's not just a symbol anymore, you know? He's still a player in the game that's moving and can have another chance if you get that revive needle and stick it in his butt, right? You know, is there something that could be said for that as well? More visual cues.
I think
if someone needs ammo, why aren't they waving at you, going, "I need ammo"? You know, like stuff like that.
I literally wish I could do that. I wish there was something like a control you could do when you, or I mean, think about it. If you're using like the rows, like if you're using the control comma rows, and you select like I need a medic, then maybe that would be the queue. You know, when you click on that, it's like I need a. Well, they do that, don't they? Already, if you click on medic on the common rows, it does go like medic or whatever.
Well,
so it does shout out.
There's a symbol,
as well,
that flashes above their head. But like, is that enough? When there's so much UI there already, do people really notice? I mean, I notice it because I play the game all the time, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm a support player. I need to be dropping people ammo.
Yeah,
because me and you, we're experienced, aren't we? But for
it's
a new
different
player,
exactly.
They'll be like, what does that symbol mean?
Exactly, you know, and again, this is the thing. Well, and again, it's like, you know, I often will charge out into like gunfire to medic people up again. Not in a situation where I know that player is going to get immediately downed again, but it's like sometimes, you know, that's what you are as a medic. And it's, again, I sometimes feel like people are taking too much care over themselves. And it's like, I often see this sometimes as well when I post. This has been the case always for me posting Battlefield content, because it's just the type of player that I am. Whenever I post Battlefield videos, if a round that I think will be really exciting and interesting, and then at the end when I put it on YouTube and I get comments that be like, oh my god, LT, you know, you didn't do great there, blah blah blah. I'm like, wait, what? Like, and it's like, no, because I'm the kind of person who'll throw myself out into stuff. I don't really care like if I die, you know. So it's kind of like, you know, if I finish the round with like vaguely a sort of 2-1 KD, I feel like I'm doing pretty good, you know. It's like I'm like, that's fine, it's fine.
But do you think that maybe removing deaths from the scoreboard would help that?
Oh god, it would help so much. They're not going to do it. Like, it would help so much.
People won't care as much, will they? They'll be like, well, my KD ratio's gonna suffer.
There wouldn't be the stigma associated. You wouldn't find people driving around in a fucking tank, like just stacking the kills. You wouldn't have, like the other day when we were playing, these 3 or 4 guys in a bomber just flying around, and again, that we had like no capable pilots, and I haven't played the game for 6 months, so I wasn't good enough as a pilot to jump in and take this guy down. So we had like no one capable of taking them out, and they were just flying around and just the guy finished around like 40-1 or something. And it was just like, oh, for Christ's sake, you know. It's just, and again, you come back to that thing. It's arguable, you know. They probably had a good impact on the game if you think about it, because obviously they wrecked a lot of people, so you know that obviously hindered us. On the other hand, so that's where you come down to, see, with stuff like this with the KD, is like there's always that talking point of like, hey, if someone's getting 50 kills, they're getting 50 kills, you know. And it's like, that's where it is. But yeah, if you want to encourage people to play better holistically as a team, then yeah, take it off the scoreboard, because then people won't worry so much.
Well, they've got rid of it in Battlefront, haven't they?
Yeah.
In Battlefront 2, it's just, they've just got eliminations, and then that's it. You don't have your deaths on there.
Yeah,
you got your score, but that's it.
I think, didn't they change it a little bit with Battlefield 1? Because I seem to remember that it was more prominent, and now like by default when you go to at the end of a round, it doesn't go like direct to the scoreboard, does it? That's kind of like pushed down, like it's not the thing that just comes up first.
You have to click on the tab on the right to get to the scoreboard.
Well, that's not bad. That's probably a compromise. I mean, you know, because again, like how many people bother to go through and check all their stats at the end of the round? I'm not sure, you know. I would imagine not everybody, so maybe that's not like a giant focus there. But again, you know, KD is always a tricky one for me. I kind of, for a long time, like I agree, I sort of felt like, oh, we must not make it the most important thing so that we focus on the core elements of the game. But then the more I think about it, the more it's kind of in the same context of, if you're going to do that, then why not just straight up tell people how to play? You know, it's kind of, you know, some people care about it, some people don't care about it. That's a choice, you know. That's why it's, again, that's Battlefield, you know. It's a choice. You play how you want to play. I feel like what they've done in terms of putting it at the, because again, people always use the example, they go, oh, in Bad Company 2 it didn't display your KD, blah blah blah. Yeah, it did, it just didn't put it like, you know, smack bang there in your face right at the end of a round. So you know, it's so I think it's fine where they have it right now. But I mean, you know, let's just go a different way with this. So I've got just a couple of more things for us to go through, I guess. And it's like ladder systems. I mean, honestly, I think I was talking to Level about this in BF3. You know, it's like it's been discussed for a long time. Like, should we have some kind of ladder system where, you know, essentially you'd still have like, let's say, quick play, or just, you know, kind of like with Siege. You know, you just kind of have your casual play where you're just like having some fun with your friends and it doesn't really matter that much. And then you have rank play. And when you go into rank play, it's like, you know, serious faces on. And it actually does try to, or it attempts to match you with players of a similar skill level.
Yeah.
I could just only see that being a good thing. And, you know, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, it's got positives and negatives. Like the positives are that you can have a system in place where, you know, like a CS:GO style system, right, where you've got you've got different ranks and maybe awards for those ranks. So exclusive skins or player customizations, whatever. If you're a global elite in Battlefield, let's say, and then you have like a season where exactly, where one platoon or one squad wins the ladder for that season, and they get recognition. Maybe they get a unique dog tag, right? So they can do all. We could spend 5 hours talking about all the cool shit that they could put in the game for people who win ranks and ladders. I agree with you. If you had a casual quick play and a ranked quick play, that would be great, because then you've got that option. But at the same time, I think if you had a system like that in BF1 with premium on top, you're splitting the player base even more. So say for example Battlefield 2018 doesn't have premium, or it doesn't have paid for maps, which is what I'm hoping for based on what they're doing with Battlefront, then a system like that could work, because you've not got that big division there anymore, right? And if you've got quick play and casual, in theory you would always have a healthy player base there queuing each separate one. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having the choice. I completely agree with you. But
you wouldn't necessarily I don't think it would be the case necessarily either that people would just play ranked all the time, because as much as this is the other thing, as much as I love to play really focused and hardcore for the objective, not always. I literally love to just jump in sometimes and just grind through, and I don't, I'm just playing the game, like I'm not overthinking it.
Well, it works in a game like Rainbow Six, like you mentioned, I think it would work in a game like PUBG as well. In that style of game, the Battle Royale game, I think it's better to have a mix of skill rather than just 100 players who are all on the same level. Because, you want the people who run around with a pan, you want the people who drive around in cars and try and run you over, and then at the same time, you want the super tactical guys who are like, okay, I've got my M4, my silencer, I'm not going to make any sound. So it's nice to have that mix of players, and I think that applies to BF games as well, right? Yeah, very much. Sometimes, like you said, you don't want to try hard. You just want to have a bit of fun. You want to focus on doing an assignment where you've got to get 20 kills with a Calibri. I don't know, right? You don't want to be doing that in a ranked game, do you?
No, well, exactly. And and I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, this is almost kind of like a 2-second throwaway question, but again, do you feel like achievements detract from, again, sort of the playing of the game? Because again, I think when I think my sort of breakdown when somebody said like, what is Battlefield to me the other day, and I was kind of like, well, I was like, Battlefield is like, it's like 6 people that are trying to play the objective, it's like 6 new players who don't know or don't care what they're doing, and then it's like 5 guys who are doing achievements and they don't give a shit what's happening in the game. It's like it's that kind of breakdown.
It really depends on what the requirements are. Like for some of the new specializations, I don't know if you've seen them, but I could rant about this for hours. But some of the requirements require you to play in such an odd way that isn't a PTFO fashion, and the chances of certain things happening, like with one of the new specializations, you don't have to do all 6 requirements to unlock them. You can pick 5 of them, right?
Yeah.
But one of them is like kill 3 elites with K bullets, and
exactly.
So many things have to line up for that to happen, and you're going to get players specifically. They're not playing the objective. They're not focusing on killing people. They're a scout class. They've got the K bullets loaded, and they're just running around the map looking for an elite class. Like that's not good for the game, is it? Right?
No.
They should be focused on things that incentivize team play and objective play.
Yeah, it's yet again, it's the fucking Goal Magnum sniper tower all over again. It's just like, that was just so insane. Just so many people just all trying to get into the tower every round, and it was just like, for God's sake, like I can't believe at this stage they're still doing these things. Like, I just who signs off on this? Like, yeah, that's gonna be a winner. Let's put that in. Like, just
Well, one of them is for BF1 is shoot down 2 planes with LMGs. So you have to get the kill on the plane, right? So while the guy is still in the plane, you have to kill it with an LMG. Now, you know how good planes are in BF1, right? They can self-repair. If you're a good pilot, you're never going to get shot down by someone with an LMG. So instead, why isn't that do a specific amount of damage to planes, right?
Yeah.
You know, why does it have to be the kill? It just makes it so frustrating and difficult, and it distracts from the objectives in the game.
Nobody's going to do it. It's just people are just going to boost it and get friends on 2 teams and then just do it like that. That's the only, you know, it's just that's the point. Like they make it so difficult that just people look at it and go, "Oh, screw this! I'm just going to cheat." You know, it's just like there's no way people are going to do it. It's just nobody's going to have the patience or time for that. You know, it's just.
Or to give you a real example, I've done that one and I did it naturally. And what I did was I went on Galicia, one of the new maps, and I spent the entire round as a support player on the edge of the map. Prone with the MG15 suppressive with 200 bullets in the mag. I spent the entire round shooting at players in the sky. Was that fun for me? No,
exactly. You've got so much patience. You've got so much patience, Jack.
Helping the team? No, I wasn't.
It's just, this is what I mean. It's not constructive in any way, and it's like, and then people wonder why I get so ranty about these things. It's like, oh my god, like it's very difficult to stay positive. And the other thing is, you know, like I say, I mean, the last kind of thing I want to come to, and again, this is another sort of throwaway thing, and then we'll just talk about like community a little bit, and we're finished. But I mean, Behemoths. I mean, I am just sick of gimmicks. Like they're stupid. I mean, okay, a great example. All right. I said again, this was another thing I said at the beginning of the game, like, this is a stupid thing, it's going to ruin everything. I know they're exciting and they look cool and it's very dramatic and people got epic screenshots of the airships burning down and, yeah, fantastic. But this week when I started to play a load of rounds again, we had like a really good round. But then because the other team lost at the end of the round, everybody cleared out, you know, the whole server just kind of died. And we ended up with sort of, I guess, maybe 17 to 10 players, you know, split. We started the next round and I said to my guys, I was like, we started off and we were clearly just kicking their ass all over the place, you know, they were just nowhere. And I said to the guys, I was like, should we try switch up? Because, you know, back in the day, that's what you'd do. Like, if your team is clearly wrecking it, I'd often say to my guys, like, oh, let's switch over and see if we can't turn it around. Again, I'd imagine this is a very rare thing that people do now, but that's I've always kind of done that. So we switched sides and, you know, sure enough, like we started to get a bit of traction and we were only maybe 150 tickets down or something over like an entire conquest round. We managed to pull it back even and we were just starting, like a couple more players joined in our team, so suddenly we had like fair teams. We turned it back and we were just starting to gain a bit of like, okay, now we're starting to win. Like me and my guys were being really on point with like moving from flag to flag, cap. And then literally as that happens, it's like a behemoth is coming in for your team. Suddenly all our players are off the ground. and then like we were like, oh man, we were like, this is gonna be really hard. We were like, maybe we can hold it together. So we were rushing around like trying to control flags and just keep it under control. And then the game's like, oh, by the way, on top of that, the other team's gonna get like a full squad join in, like a pre-made squad. And it was just like, and then they just steamrolled us and it was like, for fuck's sake. Like, and you know, that's my thing with the Behemoths. It's like, nice idea, but it breaks the game so terribly. Again, I really wish that it was an option where you could say, for example, play Operations or Conquest where they were just not in there. Because it just kind of... Do you agree? I mean, but yeah, my question is, for me, that's like a gimmick. I know it's a great selling point because it looks epic in the same way that Levolution, but... Do you think they should just be done with that and just stick to, or even, like I say, not necessarily bare bones, but can we just get to like the core of the game and just be done with those silly things? What do you think?
Well, like my experience from BF1, I can only remember one occasion where the team that was losing got a behemoth and used the behemoth effectively to actually win the game. Most of the time, if it's an airship, they're shot down within the first like couple minutes, right? And it's useless. And on a map like Lubkow Pass, to give an example, right? The amount of times I've played that map and thought, you know what, this is a great map. I'm really enjoying this. And then an enemy armored train spawns and it completely shuts off half of the map. And you're like, well, it's not a good map anymore. I'm not having fun anymore. I'm being killed by a guy in an armored train from a mortar that he fires using a mini-map, which requires absolutely zero skill. Like you say, you're right. It's a gimmick, and they look amazing. The first couple times that a Zeppelin falls onto the map, Just like the first time the Siege of Shanghai Tower falls down, you're like, shit, that was cool. Like, that was really cool. But then after that, you just don't care about it anymore. Like, I mean, if there's a behemoth in the game, I will very rarely go in it. I won't be like, okay, great, there's a Zeppelin, time to fly around and bomb people for a minute and then get destroyed. It's not fun. It doesn't help my team out.
It doesn't add anything.
It doesn't add anything really. I mean, for me and you, for some people, they might really enjoy it, right? They might be like, yeah, I get to bomb people from a Zeppelin, or I get to fire from a dreadnought and drop shells on people. But yes, it is having an extremely negative impact on team play.
Yeah.
And does it actually, you know, like I said, one game in 400, 500 hours that I can remember where the behemoth has been used as its intended purpose to actually turn a game around. Yeah.
I mean, I still think, and maybe they would disagree, but I still think that there was a funny thing happened around the release of Battlefield 4. And that was where, remember, we went to Stockholm. Remember, actually, that was the first time I met you, actually, I remember. That was when we went to Sweden, remember, for the release of BF4.
Yeah. Was it the review event where we got to record, or was it something else?
No, it's the kind of like first announcement of the game.
Oh, yeah. It was like in March, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was where Syndicate nearly got kicked out because he got absolutely wasted and was like falling over. But anyway, but no, there was an interesting thing. I was speaking to Dice Devs, and I think I got to speak to Lars Gustafsson at length, I remember, in the sort of after-party thing. But there was this kind of funny thing which happened, and it kind of really made me think at the time, where that was the first time they started talking about Battlefield moments, you know? Or only in Battlefield moments. And when I started talking to them, they were like, oh yeah, what we've been hearing about a lot is these only in Battlefield moments. And that was because in BF3 you had stuff like Renderzook, where he's like jumping out of the plane, RPGing shit and all these kind of things. And so they'd started to become aware of like, hey, in Battlefield, and anybody that was a Battlefield player was totally aware that this had been a thing for a long time, you know, where it's like...
And it's a natural thing as well, right? Yeah, you don't have to script it.
Yes, exactly. It's a natural thing. It just happens. And the very fact that it's a natural thing is what makes it exciting. Because suddenly you'll be playing the game and you're like, holy shit, look at that. Like, you know, something's happened somewhere, you know. Some guy's jumped off of something and like sniped a guy in midair, or some crap, or like a tank's fallen off a building and like shot another tank or whatever. Some kind of exciting random thing has happened. That randomness and excitement is what makes those moments. That's what makes it exciting. And I remember being at that event and speaking to multiple guys from DICE at the time, and them all kind of having this thing about like Battlefield moments. And it made me think, I was like, you know, I was like, oh no, I think at the time I was like, oh, this is cool. They're kind of aware of like how fluid and interesting and like kind of how these things happen because of the game. I was like, that's cool to be aware of that. And then sort of through Battlefield 4 and then beyond, I've started to feel like, I think they misinterpreted it. I think they sort of heard from the community like, oh, we're having these moments. And they were like, oh, people love these things. Like, let's try and make them happen more, you know? Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's kind of what's happened over time. They've tried to push these events that are just, because it was never a thing before, you know? Like, think in BF3, like, was there anything in BF3 like that? There wasn't.
No,
this BF4 was the first time, really.
Yeah, BF4 was the first one. BF3 was more focused on the destruction, I think, like rubble drops and you know. But that's all kind of driven by players, and it's not a scripted thing, really.
So for me, it feels like they kind of went on this different tangent, and I think personally they misinterpreted it. I think they heard from the community, and instead of, I mean, maybe I'm being out of turn here, and I'm, you know, being a bit sort of disrespectful. I don't mean to be. What I'm saying is I just feel like it wasn't the right way I would have personally taken it. I think that you should just make the game. Don't have these gimmicky things. Don't have these big events. Just make the game, and then these things will happen. The community will showcase it, or the community will make events happen themselves in game by doing different things. It's like, I don't think you need to go out of the way to do that. And especially something like a Behemoth, which literally, like we've said, takes stuff out of the game or inhibits your ability to play the game. I just don't think that's a constructive thing. But, you know, so let's just finish off. And it's like, so I think, look, yeah, Battlefield as a community, it's a big open environment where people can come in and out. And at the end of the day, I want people to have a really exciting time with the game. I want people, I mean, I think I posted a little, it was like a trailer I made for BF4 when I was doing my server, and I said this week on Twitter, I was like, this is how I want Battlefield to feel for people. And it's really exciting and engaging. And again, I want people to have the enjoyment and experience that I have when I play those really team play objective games. I personally feel like some people don't know what they're missing. Do you think that's a fair thing to say? That, you know, they haven't experienced it, so they can't say like, oh yeah, you're right. Because when I used to host those matches, I'd have people coming in to play because I'd advertised it on my YouTube channel, like, hey guys, tonight we're going to play on the server, come jump in, get some games. And I'd have people come in and they would come to me at the end of those rounds and be like, LT, those were the best games I have ever had in Battlefield. And again, all they're saying is, oh wow, for the first time ever, I've experienced what it's like when you have two teams which are actually focused on the gameplay, you know? And it's like...
Well, maybe, you know, having a ranked system like we talked about would fix that problem.
I think it would be a step in the right direction,
you know?
Yeah, you know. But on the other hand, I think the last thing I just want to say is I also feel like I again, want to kind of get back on my train of trying to provide for the community some team play events and stuff like this. Jack, do you think like DICE and I guess EA as well could do more to sort of say like, hey look, we know a lot of people like to play in different ways, but we're going to try and sort of be a little bit more actively involved in sort of hosting and directing people like, hey guys, there's different ways to play and maybe you should look at this. Do you think they could do a bit more there? I think they could. I think they could promote it a little bit more.
You mean like on Twitter, YouTube, whatever?
Yeah. Just, you know, sort of try to be involved in the process of like, hey guys, you know, Battlefield has always been about teams getting together and battling and da-da-da. I feel like they do it now, but it's more in a kind of marketing, PR, soft sell kind of way. And I feel like they could be more kind of encouraging and actually try to help almost form communities or celebrate the communities when you do. You know, like let's say you have someone, or, you know, it doesn't have to be just me. I'm just using myself as an example. It could be anybody. But, you know, let's say you have someone who sets up like a Discord community and those guys will get, you know, they could showcase it, they could spotlight it. I feel like that's something that could happen more.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, certainly. You know, they could focus on that a bit more. Like I remember we had when standard issue rifles came out, we did a couple of things where, you know, I made a server and then everyone joined up and we were in, I think it was Giant Shadow. There's a huge field, and we just got one team on one side to build a big trench using limpet charges. Yeah. And the other team, you know, did the same thing. And then we had a, you know, like a World War I style over the top trench attack. Yeah. Where it was like 3, 2, 1, go. And it was incredibly fun and cool. But I mean, I wouldn't ever ask them to kind of like spotlight it and say, hey, can you guys advertise this for me? But I know. I think what you're getting at is that perhaps they could focus a bit on the communities a bit more. But then again, with RSP being a bit limited, you know, maybe that isn't as possible.
Yeah, I mean, all I'm trying to find is, because the whole crux of this issue, the reason we're talking about this today is, like I say, I feel like the community as a whole has got a lot of new players. And like I just said a minute ago, I feel like sometimes people come in and the only gameplay they experience is, I mean, think about it. If you didn't have all the experience that you have, right? If you hadn't played all those Battlefield games and you hadn't played like your whole time with CS and all this kind of stuff, you come in as a new player, and this is where I'm getting at. You come in as a new player and you go into public matches and what you see is everyone following everybody else. They all go to one base. Then they don't push out, they don't do any kind of flanks, they don't prioritize stuff. They just focus on that. And you just think to yourself like, oh, this is how you do it. Do you see what I mean? Like there is no, unless you show people like, hey, you could try and do this or you could try and do that, either through tutorial videos or, you know, like often what I would do is like I record the gameplay where I've had that sort of stuff like you do as well, and you show it and da-da-da, and some people are going to see that. But again, as a community as a whole, like you said, how many people actually engage with YouTube and watch that kind of stuff, I don't know. But that's my point. It's just like unless maybe DICE EA, you know, do assist in showing what is possible. Again, it's not about dictating to people. It's just about showing what is possible. Then I don't feel like anything will change, you know.
Yeah, it's a multi kind of pronged thing where I think you can do it out of game on social media, but in game, you know, like we've covered, you can do tutorials, you can do audio, visual stuff. ranked, unranked. There's like all sorts of things that you could do to improve that, but it's not a simple thing, is it? Really, you can't just go.
No.
You can't just flip a switch and be like, okay, everyone's going to PTF owner.
Yeah, no, not at all. And like again, we've said, you know, it's not about making people do that either. But I do feel like we could show more, and we could, you know, I feel like everybody on that aspect could be a bit more proactive. It would be great to see some of those changes we've talked about be considered at least. Yeah, but you know, there we go. Anyway, good constructive chat, Jack. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thank you. It's cool.
All right, good stuff, guys. So that's my chat with Jack, guys, around the topic of BF1 and the community. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please drop it a like, share it, get other people to check it out. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, put them down below. I normally would say to people, go check out Jack's channel, but pretty certain most of you will probably already be subbed up. But if you're not, go check out Jack's channel, guys. His link is down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.